Hey YouTube, welcome back to another episode of Jay's Beer Reviews. So today I got a special beer for you. I went back over to Energy City Brewing over in Batavia, Illinois, and I picked up a relatively unique beer. It's definitely a style that you don't see very often. And so what I grabbed from them was their Bataviak, or Bataviak, whatever. Um, but this is a Baltic Porter. And so you really don't see very many Baltic Porters, so I was excited to know that they were making one. In today's episode, I'm going to go through some Baltic Porter style guidelines, and then in my next one, we'll go ahead and open up the Bataviak and give it a try. So Baltic Porter is a style, like I said, it's relatively uncommon, not super easy to find usually, at least not from American breweries doing it. And a Baltic Porter really is just a porter that's been made usually with lager yeast. Really, the history of the Baltic Porter is that, when trade routes were being made in like the 1800s, and like England was shipping beer to like Russia, what ended up happening is that like dock workers basically were getting their hands on like English and European porter. And so that region, that Baltic region, kind of like bastardized the beer. They took it, started making it with lager yeast, kind of made it a little bit more toward their tastes. While at the same time, what they kept with it was a little bit of its strength, and what they liked about it was the robust flavor you'd get from it. Truly, it's what you might call a winter warmer beer, because it does have a little bit of warming to it just by drinking it, but it's also got that kind of more robust flavor. It's a little bit more hearty. So it's something that the cold weather people of the Baltic region really enjoyed. And so when I go over to my BJCP style guidelines, actually the overall impression is a malt flavor reminiscent of English porter, and the restrained roast of a Schwarzbier, but with a higher original gravity and alcohol content than either. So this is a complex, multi-layered malt and dark fruit flavored beer. Again, there's no like fruit or anything in it, but you should be getting flavors and aromas that are reminiscent of like dates and some dried cherries, raisins, things of that nature. The one thing I will say that the BJCP style guideline adds in that I don't hear many other people talk about is blackcurrant. And as a Pole myself, I'm just very fond of blackcurrant. So thank you, BJCP style guidelines. Really, the aroma, the flavor of this beer are pretty hand in hand. You're getting just really, really dark characters without being roasted. So I look at it like this. In the grand spectrum of malt, there is very, very pale malt, and there is very, very dark malt, and everything in between. But I look at it like, if you had a piece of toast. If you took a piece of bread and you wanted to make toast, put in the toaster for 30 seconds, it comes out super pale, not a whole lot of like character flavor to it, it just tastes kind of like bread. Whereas if you take your toast and you throw it in a toaster for like 10 minutes, you're going to burn it. It's going to be like coffee. It's going to be very, very dark, and it's basically inedible, In that spectrum of what you could get out of like burning or toasting your malts, this Baltic Porter layers on a lot of dark, kind of like roasted characters without it being roasty. So that's where they get that mention of like a Schwarzbier, where they would use usually like de-bittered black malt. So you get a lot of that roast color without a lot of the characteristic like roasty, dark, burnt flavors. So this Baltic Porter is looking for a stronger alcohol beer while retaining kind of like chocolatey coffee characters without it tasting burnt at all. So it's not acrid. It's very smooth. It's almost like silky on with the rich malts that it has. You can get characteristic flavors of like it says, blackcurrant, cherries, also things like licorice. So the Baltic Porter itself is actually a very complex beer, and it's much more leaning toward the rich, malty flavors and characters rather than anything like hops or even like yeast characters. You know, like it says, they actually ferment these beers with lager yeast. Now, of course, characteristically, I mean, English beers are usually ales. So they're top fermented beers that are fermented closer to room temperature. And like I said, you know, the history of this beer traveling to this Baltic region, when I say they bastardized the beer, it means that they took the style of beer and they used their own ingredients and their own traditions in it. So you do get, you know, the majority of these I guess, like notable Baltic porters are usually made with lager yeast, simply because in the Baltics they make a lot of lagers, and that's what they have available. And now, of course, the interesting thing about using a lager yeast in it as opposed to an ale yeast, you know, whereas an ale yeast would give you like fruity esters, it adds to that touch of fruit that you might get from a beer. The Baltic Porter using a lager yeast is also going to give you these fruity characters, but it's not ester derived, it's more actually malt derived. It's like the kind of sweet up front with like the dryness of a kind of chocolatey coffee finish. You can get these very fruity characters from these malts because they use so much of the malt. The BJCP says that the ABV ranges from like 6.5 to 9.5. So this is a relatively strong beer. I mean, it's not like a 13% imperial stout, but it is a strong beer for someone who's going to sit down and drink. Well, you know, this is a 22-ounce bottle. So it'll be a good night. So rounding out my discussion of style guideline, I just want to go through the commercial examples, many of which I've never heard of before. The first one listed is Aldaris Porteris. I've never heard that before. Baltica number 6, Porter. I'm very familiar with Baltica. Devil's Backbone Danzig. Steinbrichoff Porter is another one. So the two that I am familiar with and I've had before are the Okocim Porter and the Żywiec Porter. Those are the two Polish breweries the two Polish beers that I can get my hands on very easily because I'm in the Chicago area. And so let me grab the bottle really quick. Let me take a look at it. It does say it's a Baltic style imperial porter fermented cold with lager yeast. So when I asked the brewer, you know, how many lagers they do, they actually only do a classic American Pilsner and a Baltic Porter. So you know, I'm very excited to have this one. Brewer's Notes says Brewer's Notes says brewed with Pilsner, Munich, Black Patent, Karamunic, and Special B. Dark mahogany in color, full creamy body, flavors reminiscent of plum, raisin, caramel, and chocolate. And then today's date is the January 7th. This was bottled on the day after Christmas. So this is a very fresh beer. So you know, a beer like this strong, you might want to let sit around a little and age. Of course, let it sit around properly at a good temperature, no light and stuff. But I'm not going to do that because I'm actually just very excited to drink it. Because I think it's going to be a really good one. So if you want to see me drink it, you want to get my tasting notes, check out my next episode. If you like my style guideline description, hit the like button, hit the subscribe, share it out with your friends, send me some cryptocurrency, do all that good stuff. I'll see you guys next time in episode 2 of Energy Cities, Bataviak. Thanks.